Hey guys, it's all Hamsters 101 here. So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a hamster paddling pool. So of course this isn't just going to be water, that's really bad for your hamster. They can catch colds and die from just going in straight up water. It's more just going to be like a hamster cooling pad, I guess. I find that over here in Scotland it gets really humid in the months of like August, September and October. It gets pretty humid. Which is really crappy for pets, like small pets. Like there's not enough air for them and it gets pretty heated, especially in the evenings. So I just like to make this so that they can cool down. First thing you're going to need is some sort of box. I got this from a takeaway. It's really just a plastic box. This is just like a free one obviously, but you can just use one that you keep food in or whatever. You're not really going to need the lid because then they wouldn't be able to get in. You're just really going to need the base. But if you want, you can even make the lid into one, and it just won't be as deep. Well, it's not going to be deep, but you know what I mean. It's just not going to be like have the edges on it. Then I have a glass of water, and you're not going to need as much as this. You're probably only going to need like this much of it. But I thought I would just take a really like large amount of water just so I can show you guys how little water we're putting in here. I'm using very cool water, so I've let it run for about 5 minutes so that it goes really cool. You can also add ice cubes and let them melt in if you want. Then here I just have some toilet roll. You can just use kitchen roll as well, but I just find toilet roll is softer and it also soaks up the water better. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the top. I hope you guys can see this. This is the first time I've ever like propped my camera, well, my phone down. And then I'm just going to take, the water, and I'm just going to literally pour a little in here, just kind of, that's too much, just kind of soak it around, and then that will also help wash off any impurities or whatever. So if there's a lot of impurities, you can just kind of wipe those away or whatever, but this is just to get the box damp. Next you're going to want to take your toilet roll and take just a little bit of a roll of this and just add one layer in there, or maybe two I guess if you want, just depends what you prefer. I'm just going to add 2 layers just because that's what the amount that I chose there called for. And now I'm just taking the water and splashing it all over here, and I'm just going to press it down so it soaks in all the water. You're obviously not going to want it soaking wet, but you're going to want it damp like this. Next, take your toilet roll again and just add another layer over the top of that, or another 2 if you're like me, because you don't want it to be too damp for the little hammies, because then they get way too cold and stuff in this. But yeah, I really love this. I don't really play outside with my hamsters because my garden has been sprayed with weed killer, which is really sad. But yeah, soon we're just going to have stones in our garden, and then I'll be able to take the hammies out in it. But at the moment I can't actually take them outside, so I just really use this inside, but this would be particularly good if you do take your hammies outside. Now what I'm basically just doing is shredding little pieces of toilet paper and just adding them on there, just in any areas that I find are too damp. Now the toilet paper will shred really easily, so be very careful with it when you're adding them in, but it doesn't matter if it's a little bit shredded. Just press everything down. You can even just take your fingers and run it over. Just make sure it doesn't get that way when you when you take a bit. I'll just take a little bit right now. And then you take some water and you really work at it, and all these little parts start to come off. Just make sure it doesn't do that, because I don't know, it just really isn't very nice for the hamster to walk on, because I know I hate the feeling on my fingers. And then I'm going to just add this last little bit just over the top. last thing I'm just going to do is I'm going to dip my hands in here and get them really wet, and then I'm just going to sprinkle it all over. And make sure I get the sides and everything. Now I'm just going to take the lid and add it over the top and just let this dry for maybe 1 minute or so. So this is dried for about a minute, and next, you guys can tell this is a really long process. And you're going to take some more toilet paper. I just had to go and get a fresh roll there. And you're going to take enough to layer it by 2. Okay, like layer it by 2. Then find the length of your box and fold it in at the other side of the point. Okay, so now I have this sheet that's like the perfect size to fit in here. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to put it on the lid. And the lid is basically just for shield, but if you're on laminate flooring or whatever and you don't mind getting it wet, then just go ahead and do this on your floor. And then I'm just going to put a lot of water over the top. Basically just soak it through. You guys can see this is a very long process, but to make it safe and also cooling for the hamster, it needs to be a long process. So you guys can see this is absolutely soaked through. It's basically so thin. And then what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm just going to squeeze it in different places. And just get a lot of the water out, but it's still going to be very soggy. And it's going to be really easy to rip, so just be careful at this point. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to squeeze all the dampness out of it, but it's just going to leave it quite ripped, quite soggy, things like that. Don't worry if it like rips a little bit, just squeeze the bit off and then shove it straight in there. But with the majority of it, we're just going to be squeezing. So now I have multiple pieces that are soaked all the way through, and then we're just going to take our box and we're just going to lay these over the top. You can hear that squelching sound, and that's a really, really great sound when doing this. Alright, so now you can see this really thickened it up. This part is really white, this part is really white, but you can see this middle part is not white yet because I didn't get to cover it with this stuff because it all ripped. And I'm just going to do this all over again until we have it pretty opaque. Okay, I'm just soaking this sheet now thoroughly. You can see I really do like slather the water on there. This part is definitely optional, as you guys can tell, because we are using quite a lot of the water at the moment, but there's a lot of optional steps to this basically. Alright, so now I've done that, it's pretty opaque now. What I'm just doing is I'm squelching down, and you guys can hear that really, really squelchy sound, which means there's way too much moisture in it. So I've just folded up the same thing that we were doing a minute ago and then soaking it, but I'm not going to put any moisture on it. And I'm just going to lay it straight down on top of this, and I'm going to press it down really, really hard. Now all the moisture is trapped between that layer before and then the dry layer that we just laid on there. And there's a lot of laying, isn't there? So then I'm just going to press my knuckles down on it to bring a lot of the moisture up to the surface, and you're going to see there's nowhere near enough as much moisture as there was before. And then I'm going to just pour all this back in from the lid. I forgot to do that before. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take all that moisture that I brought up to the surface, and I'm just going to pour that straight back in the glass. So it will just get soaked up basically straight away, so you need to squeeze it while holding it upside down. Seal it with the lid and leave it a minute, and then you're done. You can just basically pull the lid off and put your hand over it, and you'll feel like it's very cool and really refreshing, but it's not really wet to the point that there's moisture all over your hand. It just gives a little bit of dampness to your hand, and then that means that it's perfect. Now what you can just do is pop this in your hamster's cage. And you can see how much they love it. They'll just sit on there for hours on end. I mean, if they're not as lively as my hamster anyway, but she just woke up at the moment. And they really just love the moisture. Sometimes you'll find them licking it and stuff because they just like to pick up the moisture on their little tongues and stuff. And I particularly like to do this during the summertime, but particularly during the autumn time, because they just really enjoy it. Alright guys, so just a few tips of this is, first, make sure it's not too damp or it's not really suitable for a hamster, because it makes them get like a little chill, and it makes them get like kind of ill, like a cold and stuff. But yeah, but make sure it's got a little drop of moisture in it, and make sure it's nice and cool. You can see she likes to lick it and try and rip the toilet paper, and she puts it in her nest, but I always try to flatten it back out. And then I try to put the most moisture around the edges, because that's the area where they're going to pull up, rip it all up, and then they'll just make a complete and utter mess of it. So I like to just squish down the edges, and then that'll get a lot of the moisture to the top of there. And if you squish here, then you can just kind of put all the moisture into there, and you're going to get quite wet sides, and just kind of press them down, especially in the corners. The corners is the place to watch out for, because they're just going to chew those a lot. The next tip is just not to leave it in there all night, because it does get quite cold at night, and also it just they'll just kick a lot of sawdust into it and make a big mess if you leave it in there all night, which really stinks when that happens, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, just take it out at maybe whenever you're going to bed, maybe a few minutes before you go to bed, and when you go to give them some water or some food or whatever, then just hello there and just remove it. Also, this is a really good thing too, because you can see she just rips a lot of it up and uses it for her nest, and it just is great nesting material, especially since it's damp. It just kind of, if they leave it in their nest, it sounds really weird, but it will just kind of form into little balls like Carefresh sort of. And I do have a little bedding tutorial using about the same ingredients as well. So I'm going to have to go now guys, because this video is getting really long for like a really like little purpose. But I hope you guys have enjoyed seeing how to make this, and I hope it will help you cool down your hamsters in these humid months. And yeah, enjoy guys, bye.